Let me say this slowly, because if you rush past this, you will miss the warning entirely. February 11 and February 12 are not ordinary calendar dates. They are not random, and they are not spiritually neutral. I know this because I once prepared for these days from the other side. I was trained to watch them, to use them, to activate things on them. And when I walked away from that life, I realized how many people walk straight through these days, completely exposed, completely unaware, and completely unguarded. When I was a warlock, dates mattered more than people understood. Certain days carried permission, certain nights carried access. And February 11 and 12 were always marked, not as holidays, not as celebrations, but as transition windows. Windows where spiritual pressure shifts, where assignments move, where doors are tested. Most people feel it without knowing what it is: sudden heaviness, strange dreams, emotional agitation, old temptations resurfacing, confusion without cause. These are not coincidences. I'm not here to scare you. Fear was one of the tools I used back then. I'm here to expose, because exposure removes power. When darkness loses secrecy, it loses authority. And if you're listening to this right now, it's not by accident. Something in you is already discerning that these days feel different. In occult systems, February 11, 12 was used as a checking point, a time when previous words spoken, vows made, and emotional agreements were revisited. It's when resistance is measured. It's when spiritual boundaries are tested quietly, not loudly. And most attacks during this window don't come as disasters. They come as distractions, delays, emotional leaks, arguments, fatigue, silence where there should be prayer. So before we go any further, hear this clearly: awareness is already a form of protection. And by the end of this message, you will know exactly how to stand sealed, alert, and unmoved during these days. One of the biggest lies I believed when I first entered occult practice was that power always arrives violently. That's not true. The most effective spiritual activity happens quietly, subtly, and legally. February 11, 12 was used for what we called activation checks, not full rituals, but reinforcement moments. This is when spiritual forces attempt to engage old access points, old habits, old wounds, old emotional agreements you thought you healed from. If you've ever wondered why certain thoughts return at specific times, why certain people resurface unexpectedly, or why specific temptations knock when you're tired, that's not random. During these dates, the enemy doesn't need to create new doors. They test existing ones. They look for fatigue. They look for silence. They look for emotional overflow. And if they find any of those, they push just enough to regain influence. This is why many people feel spiritually dull during this window. Prayer feels heavy. Focus feels scattered. Sleep becomes strange. You're not under attack in the dramatic sense, but you're being assessed. and assessments determine future assignments. But here's the part most people don't know: if nothing is found, access is denied. Resistance recorded during these days actually strengthens spiritual authority. That's why awareness matters so much. Not everyone feels February 11, 12 the same way, and that's important. Those who carry spiritual sensitivity, leadership callings, or intercessory assignments are targeted differently. Not because they're weak, but because they're effective. When I was operating in darkness, spiritually awake people were always marked, not attacked immediately, but watched. Their reactions were studied, their discipline measured, their silence noted. If you're someone who influences others, even without realizing it, pressure increases during windows like this. That's why some of you feel emotional pressure without an obvious reason. That's why irritation comes quickly. That's why you feel pulled to explain yourself, to overtalk, to overreact. Those are not personality flaws, they are pressure responses. The enemy doesn't need you to fail publicly. They just need you to leak privately. A little doubt, a little offense, a little fatigue. That's enough to slow momentum. But again, this only works if you're unaware. Words matter more during spiritual windows. I cannot stress this enough. February 11, 12 are days when spoken language is watched carefully. Complaints, declarations, emotional outbursts, even jokes spoken from frustration. Back then, we paid attention to what people said under pressure, because words spoken in emotional states carry agreement energy, and agreements create access. If you feel tempted to vent excessively during these days, pause. If you feel the urge to declare defeat, stop. Silence is not weakness, it's warfare. Controlled speech closes doors. Disciplined language cancels assignments before they form. You don't need to shout prayers during these days. You need to guard your mouth. Many people report unusual dreams around February 11, 12. Not always nightmares, sometimes symbolic dreams, repeated faces, old locations, conversations that don't make sense. These are not messages to fear, but signals to discern. Dream activity increases when spiritual monitoring increases. That doesn't mean you're losing. It often means you're being observed because you're advancing. The mistake people make is panic. The correct response is grounding. Before sleep, calm your spirit. Remove overstimulation. Pray briefly, not anxiously. You don't need long warfare prayers, just authority and rest. Protection during these days isn't about objects, rituals, or extreme fasting. It's about posture, awareness, discipline. Stay emotionally clean. Avoid unnecessary conflict. Limit exposure to draining conversations. Don't overshare plans. Don't revisit old wounds. Don't reopen doors you worked hard to close. Spiritual authority isn't loud, it's settled. Here's the truth I learned too late when I was a warlock darkness. Cannot cross boundaries. It does not have legal access to. It cannot force itself into a sealed life. It waits for agreement. If you are aligned, alert, and grounded, February 11, 12 pass like any other day. But if you're careless, exhausted, or emotionally open, pressure increases. This isn't about fear, it's about responsibility. You don't need special words, just intentional ones. God, I remain aligned. I revoke any old agreements made in weakness or ignorance. I choose clarity over confusion, peace over pressure, and authority over fear. Nothing unauthorized may enter my life, my mind, or my future. Amen. Say it once. Mean it. Then move on. Once these dates pass. Many people feel relief without knowing why. Pressure lifts. Focus returns. That's not imagination. That's resistance working. If you stand firm now, momentum increases later. February 11, 12 are not days to fear. They are days to stand awake. Darkness loses power when it is exposed. And now it is. You are not late. You are not vulnerable. And you are not unprotected. Stay alert. Stay calm. Stay sealed. And walk forward knowing that awareness itself has already shifted the outcome.